Welcome to the Be Ready podcast, a space for parent, community, and classroom educators to come, learn, and share so that children are strong academically and that they develop into successful, thriving adults. Here are your hosts, and welcome to the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Be Ready podcast with DeShawn, Kamilah, and Jania. Today, we have two very special guests with us. We are honored to have Dr. Shanta Barton-Stubbs, Executive Director of New Image Youth Center, as well as Special Education Leader, Se'Kayla Harrell. So, hi, ladies. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about inclusive spaces in the classroom, at home, and in community learning environments. And I wanted to briefly talk about what led us here. So I was at work and I had the opportunity to visit a facility in Orlando called OCA. I believe it stands for Opportunity, Community, and Access. And they serve people with autism from 6 months up until 65. And when they were telling us about their services, they were saying how they are one of the few ones in Central Florida that provide transportation, that they have an 8-week summer camp, which is longer than what most places provide, and that all of their staff are trained in ABA therapy. So just a really intentional, well thought out facility, organization, I should say, that serves people with autism. And so when we were thinking about during the summer, what would be an important episode to release, we thought about inclusive spaces for people, for young people with autism, and how I have my best friend, her son is 6 years old, and she, is looking for summer camps for him. And so as we were talking about the importance of having safe spaces for all kids during the summer, both of your names came up. So we know that you all are doing excellent work in that space, and we're so grateful to be able to talk about it with you today and for our audience to hear about the amazing things that you're doing. So to get us started, could you each maybe share a little bit about your professional and personal journeys and how those experiences kind of shaped your perspective on inclusive education and child development?
Yes. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today with you. I am Shanta Barton-Stubbs. I am mostly known for being the executive director and founder of the New Image Youth Center, aka the Good in the Hood. And so it has always been our goal at New Image Youth Center to provide an inclusive space for youth in underserved communities. And so we do that with our brick and mortar in the Paramore community. We've been around for the last 21 years as of next week. And we also do that. Thank you. We also do that with our mobile activity bus, which we are known as the Good in the Hood. So our activity bus is bringing our good to other hoods. And we have an outfitted classroom space, video game section, bus that is designed for kids to be able to jump on and to receive some of the same services that they do in our brick and mortar. But we provide services in other areas such as Oak Ridge, Holden Heights, Pine Hills, Mercy Drive, and Ivy Lane. And so that is how I'm mostly known, but I am a mental health licensed therapist under the state of Florida. I specialize in play therapy, and it is always my goal to be able to create fun, expressive ways for youth and adults to be able to express themselves in an environment where they feel comfortable and welcomed.
That's awesome. It's
Thank
so good to
you.
have you here. Like, that is the good in the hood that we always want to bring. So thank you for
Thank
being here.
you. Of course. Thank you for having me.
Hello, everybody. My name is Se'Kayla Harrell. Just to start off with a little bit of my journey and background, born and raised in Miami-Dade County, and I was raised by my grandparents. So the interesting thing is my grandparents worked at a community center called Landmark, which was essentially a campus, essentially like what you said, from all the way up until 65, they served residents who had mental disabilities. So essentially, they worked there for over 30 years. So my entire upbringing, every single day after school, I was on that campus helping the residents, volunteering. So that in itself gave me a look into, having that empathy, being able to be around others who are not the same as you, but knowing that it's okay and figuring out different ways to work with them. And essentially that led me to go into teaching, which then led me to the special education track. So when I graduated from the University of Florida in 2015, I then joined the Urban Teachers Program. And that landed me in Baltimore, Maryland. And the great thing about the Urban Teachers Program is that the training is so intensive for everything that a lot of our neurodivergent students need. For example, we got training in diversity, training in equity, training in universal design for learning, trying to make that learning space, acceptable for all students so that all students have access to whatever it is that is being taught. Culture and climate, and even that whole child training. That's one thing that I can say is that urban teachers, we were placed in those urban schools, but we were given that training alongside that placement for us to then be able to handle, the challenges that we were seeing in the schools. And through that, I was able to gain my degrees in education, English, and special education. And then I finally got my degree in educational leadership, which brought me to Orlando, where I became a program specialist working on curriculum and helping teachers, coaches, principals, whoever, with just getting access to great resources that can be differentiated, implemented for different students. So that's me.
That's awesome. What a full circle moment. Like, I believe that things in our life happen and sometimes we don't know why, but they prepare us for, what God has us here to do. So it's so interesting to hear that full circle moment for you. I also wanted to take a moment to define neurodivergent because you used it. It'll come up later in our conversation. So for those who are listening but don't know what that means, I wanted to share that it's people who process information differently than is typical for their age. So that might include a diagnosis like autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. So neurodivergence in itself is not a disorder, but it's just used to describe people who process information in a way that's not typical.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, Se'Kayla, a question for you. You didn't mention your child, but as a parent of somebody who has autism and as someone who's worked in special education, how do you balance that role of advocate where you're sharing resources, but also as a mom and as an educator? So, how do you balance it, and what are a couple of key lessons that you have learned that other parents might benefit from?
That's a great question. So, yes, I have my oldest son. He is on the autism spectrum. He's 5, about to be 6 in 2 weeks. And honestly, kind of like what you said earlier, like full circle moment, right? Like I feel like everything that I went through and got experience with from childhood kind of prepared me for being that mom. To be honest with you, I feel like God chose me to be his mom for a reason because he knew I got it. And honestly, I think that first of all, I'm very grateful for all of the experience that I got because, that's given me everything that I need to be able to serve my own child and to be able to be the advocate for him. And honestly, lots of lessons. First lesson that I learned, number one, you are your child's biggest advocate. So it should never be on the school or on anybody else. It should start with you. And you can't get upset if, your child is struggling, but you aren't being that mouthpiece for them from whenever they enter school. A lot of parents don't understand a simple phone call or email is the one step between help and no help. And the thing with having students or children with disabilities, it is very intimidating, especially if you don't come up in an educational background and you're not really sure, how can I tackle this? Oh my God, what's going on? You just don't have that pedagogy. It is very much intimidating. However, the quicker you get ahead of it, the quicker you can help your child in finding out what that child needs and being able to support them, because early intervention is the best intervention. And for me, once I learned that my child was on the autism spectrum, that just signaled to me, okay, it's things that I have to do differently. It's things that I have to do differently at home to make sure that meeting his needs. And then he has a brother who isn't neurodivergent. So just balancing that. But also, it is now my job to make sure he's getting everything he needs at school by law. Because by law, these students are required to get these services. So if it's not happening, it is our job as a parent to make sure it is. And, we are the most important piece. So I would definitely say, if you are a parent and you're wondering about your kid, wondering about your student, they might be following behind. The first step is to reach out for help. Contact your local school board. I got my son tested before he even got to VBK. We were in that office at 3 years old, and I was able, when he entered VBK, he was already starting speech services and everything like that. But it started with that one simple phone call, one afternoon going out there to get those tests, and then boom, that started a track of help that has been benefiting him. My son went from not saying a word to now we can't get him to stop talking. So it is very important to, early intervention is the best. And don't be afraid. It is intimidating, but guess what? The quicker you get in front of it, your baby gonna thank you later.
I want to add on to like a piece of that, Se'Kayla, because I know that we've had many a conversation, and you are especially equipped as a parent educator with that ESC background. But what are some of the things that you noticed that made you want to reach out for help in the first place to advocate for your child?
That's a good question. So we all know when we have kids, they always give you these milestones. Now, milestones are not set in stone. However, they are a very good guideline to, what your student should be doing. The one thing that I noticed with my son is it's like he would make a milestone, but then he would regress. Like when he was, I would say up until 1.5, he was very vocal, babbling, things like that, but then it just stopped. And to me, it's like, okay, what's going on? So after that, I started noticing little things, and Google is our best friend. I'm not a medical professional, but I was able to go online like, okay, I noticed he was lining things up in a straight line. I noticed he was categorizing things with colors. I noticed that when he would get excited, he would be stimming. He's and things like that. So to me, it's like, okay, something is obviously different. So let me figure out what it is. And because I had that background, I was a little more well versed in it. But had I not had that background, just seeing those signs and knowing, my son is not acting as other children are expected to act, that in itself kind of, put my antennas up to see what's going on. So if you are a parent out there and your students have some behaviors that are just not normal or nothing that you might not have ever seen before, I would definitely say look into it. Even asking a pediatrician. Every child has a pediatrician. During that checkup, asking your pediatrician, hey, I've noticed these signs. Can you give me a referral? What do you think my next step should be? But there are tons of different resources. All it takes is the opening of the mouth and just letting them know, hey, this is going on. Help.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Shante, I'm going to turn to you and ask you a question. We just heard Se'Kayla talk about maybe having a student that is on the autism spectrum and then also having a son that is not neurodivergent. And so as a community educator, I'm wondering if you can tell us what it looks like for you to truly create an inclusive space for both neurodivergent and neurotypical youth. And if you can share some strategies or examples of how you do that at New Image.
So honestly, so let me just start with you that I started New Image Youth Center when I was 21 years old. So definitely was not an expert, had very little experience besides what I saw my parents do with their kids at church, right? But what I did identify at the very beginning, what was important for the neighborhood that I was serving. I'm very aware that sometimes I'm not from the communities that I'm serving, and I want to be able to make sure that I am like just fully well versed in understanding what are their needs? What do they have? What can I bring to the table that might be able to help? So I started this youth center just trying to provide a safe space for children. It was during that time that I started paying attention to, some of the things that or how the kids would respond to certain things. And then we had one particular child who it was very obvious that he was not one of our neurotypical children. And I didn't know exactly what the issue may have been at the time. I wasn't a therapist, but his parents were not getting him any services. And just his behavior and the way that he was responding to the other kids, it came off very disruptive. Very combative. He was literally tearing up a lot of our things. And at one point, I just remember saying, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to serve him here. But we had, of course, grown a relationship with him. And so slowly, I just invited him back one day and I started saying to the other kids, let's pay more attention to the things that he liked to do. So this is even before I went back to school for psychology and so forth, because at the time, I think I was in school for criminal justice. And we just started kind of paying attention to the things that worked for him, what triggered him, and how we could meet his needs. And before you knew it, our kids were actually responding to what they knew he liked and what he did not like. And I started saying, whoa, this is really working, especially when, I felt like there was no hope at the beginning. I remember going to his school, trying to talk to his teacher, and she just feeling as if, maybe the parents were not involved as much, but they're from the Haitian descent, and they didn't feel as comfortable of going to the school or even coming to the center to ask for help. And so we just started with little trainings and just paying more attention to what was working for him. And to this day, he is now a staff member at New Image Youth Center. He was 7 years old at the time, yes. And now he has grew up with many of the kids in the neighborhood. Everyone knows him. And although there are still some issues there that are very obvious, we also know how to meet the need of this individual. And so some of the things that we do at New Image Youth Center, we're very observant. So unlike Se'Kayla, you just shared an amazing story of how you were so aware of what was going on with your child and you immediately began to advocate. Unfortunately, in a lot of the communities that I serve, the parents are not vocal. You literally have to figure this out on your own, or build relationships with the kids, pay attention to them when you're helping with their homework, how they're responding when there's loud music. We are a youth center that loves to party and do fun things, and just paying attention to the things that they are really well at and the things that they need more help in. And so now we work with our staff in being able to pay more attention, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But we have more than enough staff at New Image Youth Center so that we can give our kids a little bit more individual attention in smaller group settings. So when you're working with children or in communities that sometimes are under-resourced, they need smaller groups. And that's one of the things that has just been success for us, of just providing those smaller groups so that you can identify what's wrong or who does better in certain environments, and then feeding off of those things and then getting them the help that they need. So maybe going to the parent to say, I recognize that, he does really good with this, but maybe not so much in this. And when you go to a parent about the things that you see, they're more inclined to share with you because they're like, wow, you really do care about my child. This is not just a number or just an organization that is taking kids, but you're taking the time to really learn my child. And because of that, they're willing to open up a lot more to you. And then in hopes of being able to go to the school together to get the resources that the kids need.
I think that's awesome. The building relationship and being intentional about paying attention. I think as educators, as parent educators, as community educators, I think that is so essential, of building that relationship and then really being intentional and observant, because that's when you're going to be able to notice things and then be able to walk along parents to help them do that, not be afraid and ask those questions. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, and I completely agree. You brought up a great point, and I think it's important to note that behavior is a communication. So a
Mhm.
lot of the times with our students, with our kids, if they are misbehaving, it's just written off as that. But a lot of the
Mhm.
times that is a signal for other things. So, if there's
Mhm.
parents like seeing these behaviors at home and just writing off as, oh, he's just acting up and things like that. If it's consistent, that might be a signal of something
Mhm.
else. So, that in itself is a great thing to put parents on notice of. If you're seeing these things or noticing certain triggers with your student, then that might be, something to look into.
And you used the word consistency, and that's one of the things that we do at New Image Youth Center so that we can have a more inclusive environment. Is that we are very consistent in how we provide our services. We provide our services in 5 pillars, and we stick to those 5 pillars. And you can see the kids beginning to thrive because they understand and they already know what to expect. And you've actually set them down at the table to say, hey, what is it that you like to do? And they see you incorporating it into your everyday programming.
Mhm.
It's the leadership for me. I think that's what you said so many amazing things about the work you do at the center, but what really hit home for me is how you said when you invited him back and you told the
Yes.
kids, let's pay attention to things that he likes to do, and all the kids joined in with you. Like, I
Yes.
think empowering kids as leaders and creating that community is something that is possible and needed at home, in community learning spaces, and in the classroom. I think it's easy for adults to want to be what we call in education like the sage on the stage. Like, I know
Hmm.
everything and we're going to do it my way and
No.
whatever, but the way that you empowered those kids, I think is so meaningful, for the student, for his peers, and for your staff. Like, you are literally replicating leaders who have a child-centered approach, and I think that's so special.
Thank you.
So to piggyback onto what DeShawn was saying about what you were talking about, I also love that because I feel like in so many words you rolled into like three of our different episodes about like the structure and the necessity that is needed for our kids. You talked about like the importance of listening and
Hmm.
hearing from our kids and advocating for them, and that leadership position that you were able to create, because then you are essentially enabling the village, right? That we always
Yes.
talk about. So it's not just, it's so easy for people to write off students or children who are not neurotypical because it's not the quote unquote norm. But what does that say about like our community, right? We work together, we help each other, we build each other, and that's what makes us so much stronger. And so, on that note, I think as an educator in the classroom, oftentimes we see a lot, unfortunately, of that happening and the lack of catering to our neurodivergent students, right? As Se'Kayla mentioned, sometimes the behavior can be looked at, oh, they're bad. I cannot tell you how many times I have shut down narratives at the beginning of the year. Oh, you're going to have this kid. Let me tell you. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. Right? Or like, when you talk to parents and immediately, especially unfortunately in our community, sometimes it turns into, ain't nothing wrong with my kid. Like, no, you can't
Yeah.
tell me that. So what are some like common misconceptions or stigmas around neurodivergent children that you, Se'Kayla, may frequently encountered? And then how do each of you work to challenge or kind of shift those narratives?
I would definitely say just the negativity, like people hearing, neurodivergent or seeing students with disabilities and automatically writing their life off as something being negative, so many issues to come. That's not true all of the time. Like, people have to understand that it's a spectrum with, yes, there's an autism spectrum, but with any disability, it can be a spectrum depending on how severe it is, how not severe it is. So essentially, even if a student is neurodivergent, that does not make them less valuable, less worthy. It just means that they learn in different ways. I
Mhm.
cannot tell you how many times that people, even within my own family, they hear autism and it's like, oh my God, like I feel so bad for you. Don't feel bad for me. My baby's smart. This little boy knows how to count backwards and forwards to 150 by the age of 5. He knows all his letters, all his sounds. He taught himself sign language.
Wow.
People confuse neurodivergent with like slow, or they just don't get it, they can't keep up. That's not true. There are so many neurodivergent people leading successful lives, successful careers. I know neurodivergent people who are lawyers. I know neurodivergent people who work with the FBI. So that does not define a person or what they can become in life. What will define it though is if a problem is noticed and is not rectified, not addressed, or anything. No support is provided to this
Right.
child to learn how to deal with their neurodivergency. But it just like everybody else, we're neurotypical. We still have issues in life. So the
Mhm.
neurodivergent students, they just have to learn how to do things in different ways. Neurodivergent is not less than, it is not less worthy. No, it's special. That's how I see
Mhm.
it, special.
That's good. And I definitely echo what you said. One of the words that came to my mind is the fact of normalizing that this is more than what we even identify or what we even share, right? And so in my community, sometimes I have a doctoral degree, I have these degrees. I'm a licensed therapist. And so people will just automatically think that I don't have any issues or any problems, right? And so that's the first thing I share is that I'm an adult with ADHD, and you should see their faces. You should see their responses. I have a brother who has ADHD. We used to say how I suffer with ADHD. I don't suffer with anything because I actually enjoy being able to think different from most. I don't want to be the like everyone else or the average, right? But I've been able to tap into a level of creativity because of my ADHD. I'm able to do several things at one time and still be focused on what I'm doing now. And so this is one of the things that I use. I normalize the fact that it's not the stigmas that we were used to or the things that we were taught 15 and 20 years ago. And so I don't talk about this much, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity of being able to even introduce mental health to the Paramore community. I was one of the first licensed therapists there. And although I was learning as I, went with the program and just throughout the years, I've just recognized that a lot of times we're still thinking in the old mindset. And so when our kids are able to identify that this individual that I was sharing with you, he loved to have fun. He loved to dance. I mean, he loved to have the center of attention. So sometimes when we're having dance parties, we would change the music just to put on his favorite song. And to see this kid like come alive with his favorite song and want to like really perform for the kids, it's a level of joy that you wouldn't experience if you hadn't learned that from him. And so just normalizing the fact that it's okay. We talk about this not only with our kids, but our parents and also our staff. We don't use certain terminology. We don't use slow. I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but you remember I'm a little unorthodox, but New Image Youth Center kids have gotten into trouble for taken up for some of the kids that may not be considered like them or normal, So they said, Miss Shante, I'm not supposed to fight. Somebody was bothering him, so we all fought. So here I'm at the school, like, okay, what we doing, right? Because if he would have been getting the services that he needed, then maybe there's a possible chance that he or none of my other kids would have to fight. So, I'm not OCPS best friend, but it's all about advocating and getting the services that our kids need. So literally normalizing is one of my number one things. And then when I say advocating on the behalf, because our kids do feel labeled. They do feel like the bad kids. My kids are known as the bad kids. It's so embarrassing when I get to the school and they're like, oh yeah, New Image kids. It's not that. It's because I do accept the kids that most people close the door to or say, no, we don't have any room. You are always welcome at New Image Youth Center. And because you are welcome, you're going to have an advocate that's going to be there for you every time so that we can get you the services that you deserve. So just normalizing the fact that we all think different. And that's not a bad thing. That's a level of creativity that we all might be able to tap into.
I absolutely love that. Anybody that knows me knows like advocacy, especially for children. When I was in the classroom, I fought hard for my kids, for my
Yes.
own babies at home, like, giving a voice to our kids, our future generation that may not feel like they have much of a voice right now.
Definitely.
So I absolutely love that. Plus, the little rebel in me says, let's do it. Like also, I hear you talking a lot about the advocacy of the students who come into your program. Can you talk a little bit about what that may look like if a parent is what do you call it, interested in having their children be a part of your program?
Yeah, so we're always at capacity, and I say that humbly because we do the things that we do, and we're known on social media. But we are this small little organization with only 2 classrooms, okay? And we are trying to make the best out of what we have, and so we do have a area for kids who might need to like get away or calm down or use some of our sensory devices. But again, that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in is we're always looking for ways to provide for the kids that we serve. So back in 2021, right around COVID time, I created this really fun, interactive activity. It's called the Cool Tools, right? And it's like this box these kids are so excited because it's full of sensory devices, but it also has like these informational cards that teaches kids how to de-escalate or to communicate in an effective way or to calm down when their anxiety is at an all-time high. So I share things like that because I would open my doors to everyone, right? But we just don't have the space. But we do have resources that sometimes we can offer parents for those who may need a place and just can't get into New Image. I do provide services sometimes outside of our area, but we also have the activity bus that we serve in those neighborhoods as well. So maybe not being able to join the role at New Image Youth Center in our brick and mortar, but we are known in different communities and being able to serve, maybe it's once a week, an hour a week programming and things so that kids can be a part.
Do you sell the Cool Tools box?
Yeah, I do. I sell the Cool Tool box. It's the funnest thing. It's 9 lessons. It has a very detailed informational sheet for parents or for teachers. And it's 9 lessons that we try to incorporate the parent and the entire household in practicing. So for one week, you may want to practice learning how to breathe properly when you're upset. Another one may be, things tapping of how can I calm down when I'm angry, and we sell those. And sometimes I'm giving them away. If they're for kids and populations that can't afford it, please, that's why we're here.
I love that. And on another note, like as a teacher in the Paramore community when Nat Ford was alive.
Oh yes,
yeah. Like the services you are providing is like just invaluable. Like I cannot say enough about the appreciation that we have for people like you in the Paramore community.
Thank you.
It is hugely needed.
It is, and it tripled and doubled and everything after COVID. And I mean, the needs are so great, are so great. This is why it's so important for, us as a community partner to be a part of the school systems, because I always share this. I know that a community school, think they have it all under control. But the truth of the matter is that things happen in the community that you would never know about if it's not a connection through an organization like New Image Youth Center. You know what I mean? So we're very grateful to be a part of, like, I hear Dr. Chapman talk about all the time, the ecosystem. We're part of that ecosystem so that we're able to provide the services. And if we can't, then at least letting the school know what our children may need, and then we can collectively do it together.
I think that's so good. I know when we worked together, Dr. Shante, with the community school, that was something that was so important, like your collaboration. And you would be at the school at a moment's notice to advocate for your students. And I think that's definitely something that I so admired about you.
Thank you.
Because it doesn't happen at every community center,
Right.
right? And for a lot of different reasons, right? It may be
Sure.
that you're not bold, like you're not, it's
Mhm.
scary, right? To go down.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about what that collaboration has looked like for you and how you really own this space of not being afraid to go to school, collaborating with the school when it is this big system that is not always most welcoming to you. So talk about how you continue to do that. And I mean, we know why you do it, but yeah, talk a little bit about that, please.
So, number one, I have an amazing support system, right? I have an amazing support system at home. I have a husband sometimes who's like, you better go. And I'm just being very honest. Like, you're not going to allow this to happen, right? And there are a few times when I was shaking in my boots and I'm like, but I don't want to go. You know, these people don't like me. I'm just kidding. But he's like, well, we're going together. And, but when you get there, and you identify or you're paying attention to how afraid the parents are, you you know, it's just our parents want so much more for their children, but they're afraid to ask. They don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be known as parents that are working too much and not there for their kids. And so really it's about you step outside of yourself to do what needs to be done. And I heard earlier Se'Kayla say that these are services that by law should be provided. By law, that should be okay. So unless the law has changed, then I have 17 kids that we need to sign up for these services. And to be honest with you, what I started paying attention to, and I'm still learning. So just know that I'm in a forever learning process. Part of my support system is also retired teachers. I have retired teachers on my staff. She keeps me very grounded. I can go to her with certain things. She's a part of the process. We have amazing individuals who are constantly just making sure that we are equipped. And so the reason why the partnership is so important is because number one, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the school system is not going to know what's happening in the community. Because again, sometimes the parents don't feel comfortable in sharing. Also, sometimes we have a student that we call just lost in the sauce, right? There are certain learning disabilities or learning deficiencies that you may not see because they know how to hide it with that behavior. So it becomes a behavior issue rather than a learning disability. So when it's time to read, this kid acts up every time because he can't read, right? And so at New Image Youth Center, with our smaller group settings, we're going to see some of these things that the school may not see right off. And we know that we can provide only some of the services. We know that OCPS or the school system or even private schools sometimes have way more services than what we can provide, but maybe we can just get that train in motion. And so we understand that's just kind of part of our job of saying, you know, hey, I don't know if you've been able to notice this, but this child has been suspended 6 times in 7 months. This is a pattern here. So maybe there's something, and this is not me just making up hypothetical stuff. When I started recognizing, oh no, you suspended again? You're out of school more than you are in school. Let's start paying attention to some of those patterns. And so we collaborate with the school and we want to be the voice of the parents and the students along with them so that we can get the services that is needed. So sometimes it is an uncomfortable space to be in, but if you don't and if we don't, then who will? And we're going to continue to see our kids fall through the cracks. We have kids who are in the 8th grade and they're 16 years old. And this is when you know that something, maybe that child has just they have not received the services they need. Maybe they have fell through the cracks, right? For whatever reason. But hey, let's rectify. Let's get this child on track. Let's see what we can do. And that's my reason why, to be honest, because these are the same kids that are 16 years old in 8th grade, but then I'm at the center and they're participating in STEM and they're like on a calculus level. Or you're seeing them produce like scientific methods and ideas that you're like, it wows you, or you put them in front of something that they really enjoy, and you see them exceed over a student that's considered an A and B student. So that's when my thought process starts saying something's not right here, because this child, there's no way that they're going to excel this much in certain areas and not have that same tenacity to want to soar in school. So that's the reason why we do it.
Amen, amen, amen. I think in the system, so often people think that kids just don't care or their parents don't care, that it's apathy. And like, that's not it at all. And I think in my ideal world, there would be so much intentional coordination between our traditional schools and our out of school spaces, because I think you guys just see things so differently. And to put those two together, I think would be really powerful. What you said reminds me of a story I hear with Elevate Orlando. I think about how during COVID, sometimes Elevate was the ones that were able to get in contact with the students when the schools were not able to. And I think that both spaces are so incredibly valuable, but we don't always give the out of school spaces the credit that you all deserve for the work you do, or bring you in so we have a complete picture. It reminds me of this story that I heard where this parent wasn't knowledgeable about the difference between like IEP goals and school standards. So it was the end of the year and finding out that her child wasn't gonna pass his grade that he was in. And she's like, but he's meeting these IEP goals, and not understanding that those IEP goals don't mean he's meeting the standards to pass, right? But like, nobody at the school explaining that information to her all throughout the year, or keeping her updated on his progress all throughout the year. But mind you, he has like multiple different like therapists that he goes to see, and people are that like on his team. And so I thought, like, man, is it possible to have a meeting between the staffing specialist at the school and his ABA therapist and the speech therapist? Because maybe he is demonstrating those things somewhere else, but there's a reason why he's not demonstrating them at school. And if you could just bring the whole team together, you could get a full picture of who a kid really is. Right. So that's something I think is so valuable. And maybe we need to try to figure out how to make that happen more in a systemic way versus you just showing up, you know?
Definitely. I agree with you 100%. I can't tell you the number of times that if we were just invited to the table, we could have helped the child way sooner than them having to be retained.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And a lot of parents don't even realize you can invite advocates and others to these meetings to speak to, your children's behavior or whatever the case may be. And honestly, Dr. Shanta, I think you are the answer. These programs are the answer. When I was in Baltimore and I was working in a charter school, Baltimore is a very special city. If you don't know about Baltimore, go ahead and look it up. But being there and working in the schools, we had so many organizations like this. And those organizations were what made the difference. We were I was working on Pennsylvania Avenue, Baltimore. And they don't even have grocery stores over there. So a lot of the organizations would come in and do food drives in front of the school once a week. And that was how a lot of those families were eating. And just different services like that, I think is so important, because like you said, the school doesn't realize what goes on outside in the community, or even pushing it further, what goes on in these students' households. A lot of the times these parents are stressed in, let's be honest. They have a bunch of kids, one kid needs this, they have to work multiple hours. But if they're taking that first step and reaching out, or even pulling in those resources like Dr. Shanta, that's more help on their behalf when they can't be there. No, they can't make every meeting, or they can't send an email every Friday to check for progress, but at least that they know that they started that path. These organizations are the answer between that connection with schools, who are just the general, and the community, which is every day, all day, no matter what. When they step outside of this school, they are right back in that same community. So yes.
I love it. Our viewers know, like, I'm all for the homeschool community connection. That's what my son was missing this year. He happens to be neurotypical, but even without advocacy programs and community programs being that extra link, it didn't happen between the teacher and I. And Okay. I am absolutely in love with like what you stand for and what your program is. Like, I love that.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we continue this powerful conversation.